How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video right here at NXTgenMD. My name is Gianluca and I am a first year medical student right here in Ontario, Canada at McMaster University, and I just want to start off by thanking you so much for clicking on this video today and checking out the channel. So in today's video, we are finally going to be talking about my pre-med journey and my experience on getting into medical school. This is something that I really wanted to talk about for a long time. And actually, what inspired me to make this video today was that I had a few people in the last week that saw my last video and they see me flying around in helicopters and they know me. I've gone now to my first family med experience. I'm working and I'm getting to watch over real doctors interacting with real patients. And I'm just having an amazing time learning all of these new things and doing all of this different stuff. And I really had to stop and think about how much of a difference, how much of a change could happen in only 1 year, right? I look back to the same time, this time last year, and I remember I was all alone, sitting in my room. It was a late night, it was like 12, 1 in the morning, and I was working on my OMSAS applications. I was filling out my medical school applications. I was applying to as many places as I could. And I was just so nervous, I was so scared as to whether or not I would actually even get an interview at a medical school. I had no idea whether or not I would ever get in. But I knew that it was something that I had to do, that I really wanted to do. And I was gonna give it my all. And I remember being there, and one of the things that was so important for me was watching other people's journeys into medical school, the whole experience from start to finish, and people talking about it. And I would use that as like motivation and also as like support to go ahead and show me that it is possible and this is how other people did it. And I also wanted to see how they compared against me, if we were the same, if we were different, what types of people were actually doing this thing that I really wanted to do. And I told myself, I said this time last year, I said that if I ever got into medical school, I would go ahead and I would make this video to go ahead and show people about my own journey so that they could maybe get some own motivation or some of their own support, and I could help them out in that way. So for that reason, I'm going to ask everyone right now if you could just go ahead, click the like button on this video, get this video out to other people that are going through the process themselves and really need this story right now to help them, just guide them through it and show them that they're not alone in this process. Now, this video is probably going to be on the longer side in comparison to the rest of my videos that I put up so far. So I'm going to go ahead and divide it up into smaller chunks. Go ahead and check the description box below for some timestamps so that you can skip ahead to the parts that you're most interested in. Or just stick around and watch the whole thing, because I promise you it's been quite a journey so far. Now, one thing that I just want to let everyone know so that they can keep it in mind as we go through this video is that here in Ontario, we have some of the most competitive medical schools to get into anywhere in the entire world. We're talking about schools like McMaster that receive on average about 5,000 applications every single year for a final class size of 206. Now, the average GPA for McMaster, for example, just because I'm there right now, is a 3.87 as far as the last time I checked. And then their average MCAT score to get in was a 129 in CARS, which is actually the 95th percentile. Now, obviously, I had to go ahead and hit these endpoints in order to get into the medical school, but my journey wasn't always just smooth, right? There was highs, there was lows, and that's what I want to talk about here today. So now, let's get started with a little bit of backstory about me. If this is your first time meeting me, hi there. Okay, my name's Gianluca. I am the oldest of 3 brothers. I come from just a regular family. None of my parents were in the healthcare system, in science in general. And as a result of my upbringing, I probably was the least informed person on this whole medical school journey process that you could ever possibly meet. I knew absolutely nothing about getting into medical school or the field in general, and when I was finally ready, when I knew that I wanted to do this, and I went to go ahead and ask some people, like I asked my parents for advice on how I could get into it, and my parents were fantastic. They were always supportive from the very beginning. But they had no idea as to how I could get into medical school, right? They weren't, their fields of interest were not really in the sciences, and they didn't know what the process was. All they really knew was that they knew absolutely no one who had actually made it into an Ontario medical school, and that the process, from what they've heard from other people, was extremely difficult. And that's all I really knew, really going into this thing, starting from high school. Now, I say starting from high school because for me personally, I think that high school was the point where I actually knew, or I thought I knew anyways, that I really wanted to get into medicine, that I wanted to be a doctor. Now, there's lots of people out there that go ahead and they say that they knew that they wanted to be a doctor ever since they were 5 or 6 years old, and I think that's great. I'm not questioning their integrity at all. However, I know that when I was 5 or 6 years old, all I really wanted to do was be Spider-Man, right? That's all I was really concerned with at the time, and it wasn't until much later that when I was actually exposed to the healthcare system that I knew that I wanted to be a doctor. So I guess now we'll go ahead and we'll talk about my high school years, right? I'll save you the whole semantics of me going through my early years before high school. And all I really know is that I started off in the 9th grade, in the 10th grade. I had no idea what I really wanted to do, right? All I knew was that a lot of subjects in school really came easy to me, right? I did all of the sciences, I did all of the maths, and I was very interested in a few of them at the time, but I wasn't really putting in too much effort in the beginning. And my grades in high school were nothing spectacular, right? I had the mid-80s to maybe the higher 80s. I was never really cracking the 90s and above. I know a lot of medical school students were getting that 95%, getting that 97% since they were like in the 9th grade, but that definitely was not the case for me. It was something that I had to work on much later. And eventually I came across the 11th grade when I was actually in a strictly biology class, right? And this was really the first time when I was in biology and then even chemistry a little bit, where I was just super excited about the stuff that we were learning. I was looking at all of this stuff and I was like, this is amazing, just to see how the body works, how biology works, how the chemicals fit together, and I could do stuff like move my arms after. It was blowing my mind on a regular basis in the 11th grade. But I mean, full disclaimer, I was also a super big nerd in the 11th grade, right? I was doing things like, I was on the mock trial team at Holy Cross, so shout out to Holy Cross High School. And I was doing stuff like that. I had a great time in high school. And on top of going ahead and being on the mock trial team, I played volleyball all throughout high school, and I also worked a whole bunch of part-time jobs. I started working part-time when I was 14 years old. Probably wasn't allowed to be working at the time, but I was working at NASCAR in Vaughan Mills, and I was having a great time trying to help out people. It was a go-kart, like amusement park type deal. And then after then, I got a job as a barista at an Italian coffee and gelato shop around my house. And they hired me, they paid me cash when I was 15 years old, working full-time in the summers when I was off school. And they hired me because I spoke Italian. I spoke Italian and I spoke English, and a lot of the customers that came only spoke Italian, so I was able to actually translate and kind of act as that bridge, and I had an amazing time working there. I learned so much about ice cream, and I probably gained like 5 pounds in each of the summers when I was working there. But those were amazing jobs for me to work starting off. Then eventually, when I turned 16 years old, I was hired as a lifeguard and also a swim instructor with the city of Vaughan, working at a local community center, and I actually worked with the city for 7 years, and that was really where the majority of my work experience really came in before I got into medical school. So then, you snap your fingers and high school flies by. 4 years passed by so quickly, and I had so much fun in high school. And then after the 12th grade, I was fairly convinced anyways that I wanted to do something in the biological sciences, right? And I thought, hey, here's a crazy idea, let me be a doctor, right? But I kind of just laughed it off because, again, no one that I knew was able to get into a Canadian medical school, right? It was just kind of like this pipe dream that everyone in my high school used to say, hey, like, I'm going to be a doctor one day, right? And I said, okay, like, even if I don't be a doctor, hopefully I could do something in biology. So I really took that mentality and I threw myself into biomedical sciences at Ryerson University. If you've heard me talk about Ryerson before, you know that I had a fantastic time there. I liked it so much I stuck around for a 5th year, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And wait one sec. To anyone currently trying to get into med from Ryerson, quick shout out to Ryerson University. It was home for 5 years. I had a great time there, and it was a great school in my opinion. Now I was there, and once I got into Ryerson, again, this is no fault of the university itself, but I was in for a rude awakening, right? I flew through high school with the merit of just me getting by because things came easily, but it just wasn't like that for me in university. I remember going into first year, and I got my butt kicked, especially in the second half of first year. The first half went really good because it was a lot of high school review, and then once we got into the second half of first year, I hadn't really developed those strong study habits at the time, and I walked away with a straight 4.0 in the first semester, but the second semester did not go as well comparatively, and I ended up finishing first year with a 3.7. which at the time I was like, okay, like that's actually not bad. A lot of my friends were actually failing classes, and I was just happy. I felt pretty good that I was still getting my A minuses and a few B pluses here and there, but a lot of A pluses kind of compensate, right? Little did I know that a 3.7 is not going to cut it when it comes to your first year of university, right? I remember being in high school, a little bit of a backtrack, and I wasn't getting those 90s, and one of the biggest pieces of advice that I got from one of my professors at the time in high school was that I said, hey, like I hear that getting into medical school, you're gonna need some 90s, some 95s. I'm not getting that right now in high school. Do you think it's possible for me to pull this off in university? What are my chances? And my teacher at the time, she kind of looked at me and she goes, well, I'm not saying that you can't do it. I'm just saying that it's not going to get easier in university compared to high school. And I want to go ahead and stress that to everybody right now. If you're skating by high school and you're watching this video and you want to be a doctor, I'm just going to let you know that university is not the same as high school. There is definitely a step up in difficulty. And again, this is going to be, relatively speaking, based on whatever program you're going into. But it's not high school anymore. It's a different thing, and you're going to have to go ahead and apply yourself to an even greater degree. And I think I just got totally thrown off guard, specifically in my first and my second years of university. So then second year came around, and second year, comparatively speaking to first year, was significantly more difficult. I came across courses like statistics, like biochem, like advanced biochem, and I didn't do poorly in these courses compared to a lot of my friends, right? I didn't fail any of these courses, but I definitely wasn't getting the marks that I needed. Right, I ended up finishing second year with a 3.3 GPA, which was a big hit to my overall GPA, and it really kept my GPA down moving forward for the rest of the time. Now again, I put the onus entirely on myself here. During second year, I was still commuting to Ryerson from my house in Vaughan, and that was a 2-hour commute with public transportation in one direction, right? It was walk from my house to a bus stop, take that bus to another bus to the subway, and then subway the full way around 2 hours, and that was just one way. Then I had to do the same thing going back. I lost a lot of time in those first 2 years, and even the first half of third year, in the whole commute thing, and it really didn't make things any better that I was also working 3 days a week at the pool, a considerable amount of hours anyways, considering that I had homework to do and things of that nature, and it was really hard for me to get that studying done that I really should have been doing. And on top of that, because I was working and the commute and just other things going on in my life, when I finally would go home, I was super tired, and I would go ahead and I would study, and I'd stay up late, and then when I stayed up late, I'd go to class, and I wouldn't be able to participate in classroom discussion because I'm falling asleep inside the class. And you see now that we kind of have this spiral going, right? The later you stay up, and the harder it is for you to wake up in the morning, and then you go to class and you fall behind, you gotta stay up later in order to recover from that, and it just gets worse and worse and worse over time. And if you ask me, I'm actually lucky to have gotten out of second year with the habits that I had, and maintain that 3.3 GPA. Now, you're probably sitting there right now and you're going, Gianluca, why are you telling us this? Like, you're not really selling yourself as the most scholarly individual. And guys, that's not the point. That's not what I'm here to do today. I'm trying to help people out. This is so much bigger than just myself. I want to go ahead and try and reach in down into that spiral and pull people back out and say, listen, you gotta get it together just like I did, because the way things are going, it's not looking good. And the way that you do that, what I'm gonna go ahead and share next is the start of my third year. And this is really my comeback, right? I had a lot of people that were counting me out at this point, saying you're never gonna make it. You should go ahead and start looking into Caribbean schools right now, like it's not looking good for you. And I remember there was one night, starting in third year, I was still commuting at the time, I was still working, and I was looking at my marks, and I was looking at the requirements for the Canadian schools, looking at a province, looking everywhere. And I kind of had this moment of, like, this whole, it was full embodiment of fear. I sat there, and I was so disappointed in myself. I was like, this is terrible. I'm never gonna make it in, my dream's over. I went downstairs, I remember I was sitting on my bed, it was like 3 a.m. and I was going through all the admissions requirements, and I'm like, it's done, that's it, they're all there is for me. I went downstairs, my brother was up late studying too, and I told him, I said, listen, Pierre, like, I know we got this dream going that we're gonna do this together, but it's not looking good for me, so good luck with you, because I don't know what I'm gonna do. And he kind of said some reassuring words, and it didn't really hit me at the time, but he really helped me out. And then I went back upstairs to my room, and I felt sorry for myself for like 2 days. That's all I gave myself. I gave myself 2 days to feel bad for myself. And then I remember waking up one day, it was Monday, and I said, no, that's it, I'm done. I snapped, and I said, a little something inside snapped, and I said, there is nothing out there that separates me from any other person that's trying to do this whole medical school thing. The very fact that there are people out there that are getting the 4.0 GPAs consistently tells me that it is possible and that I could do it, and I just need to go ahead and make some small changes in my life that when they start accumulating together could change me entirely as a student and make me a much more competitive individual in terms of both life experiences and my actual scholarly potential. So I picked up my marker, I walked over to my whiteboard, I had a whiteboard going in my room, and I wrote down on the whiteboard, no more B pluses or lower. That was the rule, that I could not get a B plus from that point moving forward. And I wrote it on my whiteboard and I circled it. And every morning I woke up, I looked at my whiteboard and I saw it, and I'm like, straight A's from now on, that's it. It's that easy, that's all I had to do. Now, the harder part was how do I go about making that happen? And I made a video on this channel before, I'm gonna link it up here, on how you can go ahead and set yourself up for success in undergrad. But it basically comes down to doing your homework consistently, showing up to class, sitting at the front, and interacting in classroom discussion. Those are the biggest things that you could do to change your performance in your undergraduate degree, whatever it is. I don't care what program it is. The next thing I did was that I went to work, I sat them down and I said, listen, I love working here, you guys are fantastic, you've always treated me good, but there are more important things for me to do right now and I need to get them done. And that meant taking a back seat at work. I was a supervisor at the time and I said, listen, I gotta give up a lot of hours, and I did that. And then all of the money that I've been saving up from working so much at the pool, I took that and I said, I'm done taking the bus. I can't do this anymore. 2 hours was driving me crazy, so I went out and I bought myself a car. I didn't just buy myself any car, I bought the car that I really wanted to go ahead and drive because it was all about changing the way that I went about things in general. Right? I bought myself a 2016 Mustang with everything that I saved up. I named her Maya, and thankfully my parents were able to help me a little bit at the time with insurance and stuff like that, and that was the start of a new part of me, right? And starting in third year, from that point forward, I never took a single mark below A- ever again. I went forward and I killed the second half of third year, and then I went into fourth year. And fourth year, I did even better than third year. I think in all of fourth year, I got maybe 1 or 2 A-, and then at the end of fourth year, I went ahead and I wrote the MCAT for the first time. So let's go ahead and talk about that really quickly. So at some point in the future, I'm going to go ahead and release a nice extended video on the MCAT because it is a beast of a test. It is 7.5 hours total sitting time from start to finish, going over all kinds of stuff that you learn in a science undergrad, ranging from psychology, sociology, biology, chemistry, physics, verbal reasoning, and it is just one of the most important parts of your application. But at the time, I didn't know that. Why? I wasn't exposed to it. I wasn't actually getting in and doing the additional work. I was just too focused on going to school and doing that. And then when the summertime came around, I spoke to one of my friends that had written the MCAT before, and he goes, first of all, my friend is an absolute genius, the person that I knew at the time, and he went, dude, don't worry about it. I know the way that you've been working at school. I went ahead and I studied for the MCAT for 2 weeks, and I scored a 515 studying for 2 weeks. You're gonna be fine. All you need is about a month. So I told myself, I'm like, okay, like maybe a month, right? Like a month sounds good, but let's make it maybe a month and a half, right? And that was how much I had set out in my head. And then at the same time, I was taking English courses in the summertime in case I wanted to apply to UBC further down the road. And then in the summertime, the car payment started racking back up, so I started working again way too much. And then I just wasn't studying enough. I wasn't giving the MCAT my all. I didn't give it as much prep as it deserves, as it needs. And the first time I wrote the MCAT, guys, I went and I scored a 505 on my first MCAT. And the worst part was that when I got the score back, I wasn't the least bit surprised. Sitting down in that test and knowing that I hadn't given it everything that I should have. I took that experience and I'm like, I'm going to do it again. And that's it. And I'm going to do it as many times as I have to. But I was going to do it differently. I learned from my mistakes. I took what I did and I moved forward. And the next time I went and sat the MCAT, I handled it entirely differently. Right here in Ontario, most schools, pretty sure all schools actually, will allow multiple attempts at the test, and they always have different requirements. But the second time I wrote the MCAT, I learned my lesson and I gave it the full 3 months of studying. I finished my last exam and I took a week off from my last exam. My last exam was the end of April, and I took a week off just to recover from that entire entire year because I had I totally killed fourth year. I got like straight A's, pluses on most of the stuff. And I took a week off after my final exam to go ahead and beat the Halo 3 campaign on Legendary one more time for old time's sake and to really de-stress. And then I gave it 3 months of MCAT prep. I woke up every day at 8 o'clock and I started studying by 8:30. I was showered and ready to go. And I did this for 3 months straight. I finished studying at 6 or between 6 and 8 at night, and I only took Sundays off. I did Monday to Saturday because I was just determined. I was so ready to go ahead and give this test everything that I had. And I knew one thing. I knew that there's people out there that might be smarter than me. But you know what, when it comes down to it and my back's against the wall, there is no one out there that's going to work harder than me in preparation for this test. And to this day, there's not a lot of people that I know that was able to pull off the type of studying that I was doing at the time. They're out there, but I worked super hard studying for this test. And again, before I got started, I walked over to my whiteboard, and now I was getting good marks, so I erased the whiteboard, and now I had a new goal on the board. I went over and I wrote 515. I want a 515 on this MCAT, that's the 95th percentile, and that's it. That's the only score that I'm going to take moving forward. And I studied, and Monday to Saturday, right? Studying. Sundays I was allowed off. Turns out my birthday fell on a Saturday that summer. It was Saturday in July, and it's too bad. It's too bad. I was at the library doing a full-length practice test, the 7.5-hour test on my birthday. And one of the things that I did for my birthday is, before I got started with the practice test, was I wrote out happy birthday with the amino acids, because most of the letters are there, and I posted it on my Instagram story, and one of my friends that was also doing med saw that, and she was like, I feel so sorry for you right now. But I didn't. I knew that I had to do this, and I got it done. And then when I got my score back, I got my 517 back. The way that it broke down was I got a 129 in the chemistry section, I got a 131 in cars, a 129 on the biology section, and then a 129, am I doing this right? A 128, I think, on the psychology section was my final thing. And it was just that moment where everything paid off, all of my hard work. And I felt super proud and accomplished with myself at the time. So now the final thing that I want to talk to you guys about is the extracurricular part of my application and what I did in undergrad and before in order to get into medical school. I've already made an entire video dedicated to the topic. You can go ahead and find it here on the extracurriculars that I think are most beneficial for students that want to eventually get into medical school. But we're talking, I had things that I thought would make my application very strong at the time. I had things like, I had research with my thesis project. I had thousands of hours working with the city over the course of 7 years, and how I've climbed the hierarchy in terms of starting off as a lifeguard, moving on to a supervisor, and then even further beyond then. I've worked at a hospital at Princess Margaret. I worked in the clinical trials pharmacy for years, for 4 years there, and I made so many lasting connections with so many of the staff there. And then other things I've done. I've got into underwater photography with the sharks, maybe you've seen that already. I got into skydiving and just a whole bunch of other stuff. And I think that on top of making a strong application for the applicant, the extracurriculars are so important because there's just something that you can't learn in the classroom compared to what you could learn outside of the classroom, right? There's something that you learn about the world, about yourself, when you are 100+ feet under the water, surrounded by bull sharks, with just a few people together and a little camera in front of you, right? There's something that you learn falling out of an airplane by yourself with nothing but a parachute strapped to your back, knowing that if you don't go ahead and act the right way in the moment and use your training, that no one else is going to come and help you. And finally, there's something that you learn working day in and day out for years at a hospital with real patients that come to you, with people that have come to the clinical trials pharmacy and they're nearing their end of their life, and they're sitting down because they have no one else there with them, it's just them, and they're talking to you one-on-one, and that they're sharing their entire life journey with you. And to them, it's the most important thing in the world that you're there and you're just listening, right? They have a little bit of a glint in their eye, and then they end off the conversation with thank you, right? Just thank you for listening, but I'm just so glad that we had someone here. So now I had this amazing MCAT, or something that I was really proud of anyways. I know there's a lot of people that get better scores than that, but I was super happy with it, and I still knew though that it wasn't over for me yet. I still had a lot of making up to do to show the admissions panels of these schools that I had learned and that I had become this amazing applicant that was just as competitive as everyone else that was applying. And I was debating at the time between a master's and a 5th year. Maybe I'll do a video on it in the future if enough people want to see it, but I eventually decided on taking a 5th year of undergrad. I delayed my graduation and I stayed for that 5th year. Not only did I stay for 5th year, but I changed the goal on my whiteboard. I walked over and I said, let's try it one time. I want straight A pluses one time in my entire life at university. And not only do I want straight A pluses, but I want straight A pluses in the hardest courses that I could take at my university, right? This was about proving to myself now, as well as everybody else, that I had changed who I was, that I was just as competitive and just as strong of a candidate as anyone else. And I took advanced immunology, I took a thesis project, and I took everything that I could to go ahead and show the admissions people that this is it, and this is who I am. And I did it, and I killed that section. I just had a great time in 5th year. I worked really hard, but at the same time I was also applying that year because I thought, why not, right? You go ahead and you lose every time you don't try and step up and attempt something. And while I was in 5th year, I was fortunate enough to go ahead and get 2 interviews, 2 medical schools here in Canada this year. I got medical school interviews at McMaster and another interview at Queen's, and I was just over the moon excited to go ahead and show these people who I was and show how enthusiastic I was to be here in medicine. So now here I am staring at these interview invites, and I was so thankful to have them, but I also knew in the back of my mind that I was at a disadvantage going into the interview process because I had still terrible overall GPA. I had a 3.63 overall GPA. My last few years were great, but just the way that it adds up together, it wasn't able to fully, I never really recovered from the 3.3 that I got in that 2nd year and my slow start just in general. So I took those interview invites super seriously. I remember just with everything that was going on with school and with my family stuff too, and then I would practice for these interviews. I was practicing for interviews from the day that I got the interview invite, and I worked together with other people that I met at school that were also interviewing. And then I went ahead and I sought out interview prep from other people and the guidance counselors at school. I read Doing Right a 2nd time. I looked up. We were talking that I spent maybe like hundreds of hours in preparation for my interviews. It was the only thing on my mind at the time, aside from all the commitments that I had with extracurriculars. And I knew that this was something that I could really go ahead and show my best at. And then I went to my Queen's interview. I went in there so sure that it was going to be an amazing interview, and I went there and I don't know what happened, but the nerves hit me all at once. And I finished the Queen's interview. It was 2 hours long, and I got out of there and I went back to the hotel room and I put my head underneath the hot tub, and then I hid under the hot tub for about 5 minutes holding my breath and coming up for air in between intervals, because I thought that it wasn't the best interview I've ever given, and I thought that after something like that there was no way that I was going to get in there. But I didn't let that hold me back. I knew that I had my McMaster interview coming up in the future. I had just finished the Queen's one. So then I got back, I went home, and I started preparing for McMaster. I said, what's done is done. I tried my best at the time, but they're not going to get me twice. This 2nd interview is going to be the one, I could tell. And I went back to my whiteboard one more time and I wrote it down and I said, McMaster interview, and I highlighted it with my markers. And again, I started practicing and I showed up to the McMaster interview, and it was a totally different story than the Queen's interview. I went in and I enjoyed the day, right? I made sure that the hair was on point and made sure the suit was nice. I knew it didn't look good. I had a blue tie on. I had a blue tie with a black jacket and some brown shoes. And I just went in there and I tried to be as confident and enthusiastic as possible. And I remember walking out of that interview, going back to my car and thinking, that was the one. This is not the last time that I'm going to be here. And then fast forward a few months and here I am at McMaster Med School, and I'm super excited and I'm thrilled to finally be here at the end of the journey. And guys, that was it. Thank you so much for listening. Finally, we have our conclusion for the day, and I just want to wrap this up in saying that I acknowledge that there's lots of medical students out there, there's lots of YouTubers out there that by me watching them anyways, for all intents and purposes, they look like they've just always been perfect, and whether or not that's the case, I can't really decide. I can't speak for anyone else, but I can tell you that I am proud to have struggled through many different things in my life. I've been through the highs, I've been through the lows, and to have come out on the other side as a professional, as someone that's trying their hardest to help other people, to learn everything that they can, and just to live my life trying to lead by example, I think is a big thing that I'm really trying to do here. So I want to finish this up in saying that I don't know who you guys are. Once again, I'm just talking to a camera right now, right? There's a lot of real people behind here right now, but I can't see you personally. But I want to tell you that there's a lot of you that are going to have an easier time getting into med school than I did, right? But there's also going to be a lot of you that are going to have a much harder time getting into med school than I did. And I totally acknowledge that. We're all different in the path that we take to get in. But I want to assure you, the value of hard work cannot be undermined, it cannot be understated enough, right? Put in the work, keep going, remember why you did this, and I want to go ahead and wish everyone the best of luck. I know that sometimes it seems really rough and there's some really dark times in this journey ahead of you, but just look at the difference in my life in only 1 year. That there's times out there that are going to be different from where you are right now. But I want to go ahead and also extend this offer to everyone. I know that some people have a lot more support than others. You know me now. My name's Gianluca. I'm the oldest of 3 brothers. I go to McMaster Medicine. If you guys ever need anything, if you need someone to just to reach out to, you want someone to talk to about anything that's going on, go ahead, leave a comment on this video. I'm going to answer you. Or if I don't answer you, someone else is going to answer you because I'm trying to get a community going on here. But I'm going to go ahead and try my hardest. So that's pretty much all I want to say, guys. Thank you. I can't thank you all enough. I hope everyone's having a great day where you are. Best of luck on your medical journey. Remember why we're doing this. And until next time, thank you so much for checking out NXTgenMD. See you later.